Hey everybody, it's Ian. Time for another episode of Native Film Talk. And today we're going to talk about Rezball. Dun, dun, dun. We're back. We're back to talk about Rezball. And I'm excited for this episode because it was one that I didn't think I was going to do for a long time. Spoiler alert, I wasn't really a big fan of this first time I saw it. It was a little better on the rewatch, so recommend you rewatch it if you've only seen it once. The pacing in this movie is a little off at times. And I think that's what caught me off guard initially, but I think we give it a try. I think for a long time I was just hell bent on the fact that I didn't like this movie, and I will play a Family Guy clip to prove, I guess, my or to show my position. It was almost like a position of like stubbornness.
I did not care for The Godfather.
What?
Did not care for The Godfather.
How can you even say that, Dad?
Didn't like it.
Peter, it's so good. It's like the perfect movie.
This is what everyone always says. Whenever they say,
Robert De Niro, Al Pacino. You
listen.
never see Robert Duvall.
No, fine actor. Did not like the movie.
Why not?
Couldn't get into it.
Explain yourself. What didn't you like about it?
It insists upon itself, Lois.
What?
It insists upon itself.
What does that even mean?
Because it has a valid point to make. It's in.
Yeah, so that's basically how I felt. I felt like anytime I brought it up, people were just like, well, what do you like about it? And I didn't have a great point. And I think for a long time I was stewing over the idea of like, why don't I like this movie? It's just odd. So I've laid out some points and let's go over it. But first, as anything, let's go ahead and go do a quick cast review. So for those of you that watch on YouTube, you can see my screen. We're looking at going line by line of the cast members on this thing. I was pretty impressed by the all-native cast. There were some new folks that were brought to the screen. Most notably, the main one's not Navajo. Not a Navajo in sight. It took a playbook out of Dark Winds here. So Sydney Freeland is Navajo. She's the director and co-writer. So that's a win. I think she went to Navajo Prep. She made Drunktown's Finest, which featured Ernest from James and Ernie, the comedy troupe. Ernie. And he's in this, and he's fantastic in that. But one of the biggest criteria they were looking for is, can these kids actually play ball? And so I think that's partly why they didn't select Navajos, I guess. I don't know. I heard there were 5,000. I've read multiple articles stating 5,000 people auditioned for this, and they ended up landing on these folks. And they chose some of them, and they happen to be Navajo. I don't believe that was a priority based on the people that they chose. So Kachani Bratt, he played Jimmy Holiday. He's the lead person in this. He is Kachua and Cochuatican. Oh my God, I butchered that. But it sounds like he's from Canada, from up north. Jessica Madden, Métis from up north as well. Devin Simpson Craig is from Yakima primarily. Amber Midthunder, not Navajo. Then we got River Rain Thomas, once again, not Navajo. Then we got Avery Hale, not Navajo. Hunter Red Horse Arthur as Kobe Nez. He actually is Navajo, so that's one of the first ones. Henry Wilson Jr., shout out to Leland Tom, actually Navajo. And then Jaron Robledo, Navajo. And then we got Damian Love Smokey, not Navajo in this one. Then we got Kusum Woodwin, who plays Natani Jackson. Natani, very Navajo name. This individual, not Navajo. It's Coeur d'Alene Nez Perce. Then we got Ernest David Sosi, who is Benny Begay in the movie. He is Navajo. So we got some. And then JoJo Jackson, which I didn't see his name up on here, but JoJo Jackson is Navajo. I thought that was interesting that the selection of non-Navajos in this Navajo movie. I don't know. I'm not a casting director. It's not my job to hire these people, but it's interesting to me to have a Navajo story on the res that you're talking about Navajo, like community using the Navajo language. One of my primary pet peeves of this show, if you follow this show for any duration, you know, if you are not from the tribe that is being represented and you are speaking the language of that tribe, it's a problem. That might be a hill that I'm going to die on that is going to come to pass. It's like, Ian, that's ignorant. You got to get past that. But for me, it's just like, if you're going to use the Navajo language in the movie, especially as a plot point to drive the story, then have the people be Navajo. That's just, I don't know, but that's just me. So we'll get further into it. But the plot, the cast, rather at a glance, looks great. I mean, yes, the Navajo issue is a problem, but all these people are native, so that's great. And then more importantly, a lot of them are new, a bunch of new faces that are going to be use this as a springboard to continue to get more work. And I think that's the most important thing that I want to focus on. Let's talk a little bit about the motivation for this. So this is going to be a little bit of a sticking point for me because this was based on a non-Navajo's perspective. Believe it or not, Rezball is drawn on by this individual's name. His name is... Oh, it's going to drive me nuts that I don't have it right away. Okay, bear with me for a second here. Bear with me. He's a Navajo, not a Navajo. He's a New York Times journalist. I had it right here. Where the heck is it? His last name is Powell. Regardless, he wrote a book. He wrote a book about Rezball, and he wrote a story. Michael Powell. I'm sorry that took so long. Thank you for bearing with me there. He wrote a New York Times article about up-tempo basketball, and he followed the Chinle basketball team. And based on what I understand, the Chinle documentary series, Basketball or Nothing, the focus of that school, it was the reason why they focused on that school was because of this article that Michael Powell had written in the New York Times. So that was one of the main reasons they spotlighted that. And of course, the right people got behind it, Nota Begay and Ricky Fowler. But they chose Chinle because of his article. And he did also write a book that also inspired this. And at the very end of Rezball, you'll see that these were inspired by these two. Now, that's not to say that Sidney Freeland would just took that story and ran with it, and Sterling Harjo just took that story. They loosely inspired is what I understand. But still, it's like, come on. I mean, that to me, that just tells me where Netflix's priorities are. If they can't even give Sidney Freeland the latitude to say, you are going to use your own story, Sidney Freeland, who is from the reservation, played Rezball herself, you are going to own and write your own story. Instead, they have to latch on this New York Times journalist, Michael Powell, this white dude that parachuted in and was enamored by just the way that these natives lived with the up-tempo version of basketball, and look at all the adversity that these people deal with, and look at the conditions that these people live under, and look at how the community just rallies around basketball. I can just see this like romanticized, just so many. Yeah, it makes me sick a little bit, honestly, to think about how it is probably portrayed in the New York Times article, but that's where we are. So that's the source material for this. So I just want to set the stage. So let's just jump right into it. Now that I kind of talked a little bit about it and it gave my initial reactions, let's talk about just kind of at a high level the wins. Let's talk about the wins first. Positives, negatives, final thoughts to take us home. If you've been here before with the show, you know that's what I talk about. Let's talk about Navajo language and culture. Positives, let's jump right into the positives. Navajo language. Navajo subtitles, I thought that was cool. I'll talk about it being a negative later on, but like the negative aspect of it. But I thought just at a glance, the fact that Navajo subtitles are available, we had advocates in the production floor to say, hey, I want Navajo subtitles to be available for this film. I thought that was cool. There was Navajo spoken by Navajos. While I have reservations, pun intended, with Dark Winds using Navajo being spoken by non-Navajos, much like Dark Winds, they actually do have Navajo speaking Navajo in this, and that was awesome. Just chef's kiss. Like throughout here, you have Navajo elders in here, both men and women, and you have Navajo youth speaking fluent Navajo. Krista does a great job speaking Navajo in this. I assume she's Navajo based on the way she was speaking, and I thought that was badass. The Navajo setting, this actually took place on the res, most of it anyway. From what I could tell, shooting locations were in Albuquerque, was in Los Lunas, was in Chinle, and was in Shiprock. Those are like the most notable ones that stood out to me. But having it being shot in Shiprock and Chinle, like that was badass. To see those gymnasiums showcased, to see that community community showcase. I really enjoyed that part. The next thing I want to focus on is Cody Lightning and Dallas Goatooth. There's like the number one, number two guys, and I thought the fact that they had KTNN as a real radio station in this, like if you're for any Navajo that saw this and saw that KTNN got representation, was awesome. But the two commentators, Cody Lightning and Dallas Goatooth, were awesome. They were the like commentators in Dodgeball that just brought so much humor and just added so much throughout the entire movie, in like providing color commentary and humor, and it was just great. So shouts out to Cody Lightning, Dallas Goatooth. There was two shining moments in my rewatch. I realized that that's one that I didn't focus on as much the my first watch through, and I'm really happy that they were in this film. Representation, specifically KTNN. I want to talk about KTNN. KTNN is the voice of Indian country, the voice of the Navajo Nation. KTNN 660, and that's a staple on the Navajo Res. So the fact that KTNN was on Rezball is just like it's gonna live on forever in my eyes. That's awesome. The comedy duo, I touched on that one. Let's just talk about the basketball talent. So I had my gripes about the fact that they didn't have Navajos at the forefront playing this Navajo movie and a Navajo story using Navajo language, but we'll go ahead and put that aside for now. Let's put a pin in that and let's focus on the basketball. These kids can ball, and I'm glad that I know reading the backstory of how they casted this. 5,000 kids came. A part of their criteria for when they showed up was they had to do line reads. They had to have video of them doing a layup, shooting a free throw, and shooting a 3-point shot. And if they didn't look like they could ball, then sorry, I don't care how good of an actor you are, you're not going to get this role. And I thought that was a great entry point, or that was a great a toll that you had to have them pay to enter, because it showed these folks are new talent. Some of it is raw. They're acting. You can see it clearly, but they can ball. At no point was I in disbelief that these kids could ball. At no point was did I wonder, like, can they actually play ball? Like, it looked legit. And the choreography on the court, it all looked awesome. Wasn't quite on par with like Coach Carter, some of the better basketball movies I've seen, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought the basketball choreography was awesome. The plays. Now, I didn't get the impression it was like Teen Wolf, the Michael J. Fox movie, where they're just like recycling plays over and over. Like it was legit, and it wasn't awful choreography where it wasn't believable, like the Disney movie Double Teamed, when she's like juking and dancing on the court basically with 6 seconds left. Wasn't anything like that. Was not laughable. Was not embarrassing. It was great. So let's pivot to the writing. The writing of the everyday speech of the native kids was chef's kiss. It felt authentic, and it felt so close to real life that never once did I feel like cringe with the way that the kids were speaking, with the everyday conversation. And there are times where, if this was written by a non-native person, it would have gotten like Save the Last Dance vibes, where it's like, this person's not from the community. Who the hell wrote this? And at no point did it feel like that. But that's because you had Sidney Freeland, you had Sterling Harder behind this. So those are great. Let's talk about some memorable moments. Let's pivot to memorable moments. The sheep herding scene, I just thought that was cool. It was corny. I want to be honest. It was corny. I didn't need it, but the fact that it was there, I liked it, because it had a great down-to-earth scene that I really enjoyed, where the coaches, Jessica Matten's character and Ernest Sosie's character, are playing poker with the grandma, and that was just cute. It's just a cute scene. Like, I could have used more of that interaction. I want a short movie with just the grandma. Like, just have a story with there. Like, that would have been great for me. I really enjoyed that interaction. The sheep herding scene, just the fact that they tried. It was a little cringe. It was a little like try hard. Like, we gotta fit some sheep herding in here, and it's just, I was like, really? But hey, this is the first time I've ever seen sheep herding on a major motion picture level, and it is a experience that every res native kid, every res Navajo kid pretty much has had, either directly or indirectly. They've either done it themselves or they know somebody that has sheep and has had that experience before. So I think that was great. The fact that they captured that was awesome. The next thing I want to focus on is the fact that they gave women basketball their due. That the scenes where they had the boys basketball facing up the men's basketball, trying to get the boys basketball team to be like a 7 seconds or less team. And the beauty in that is, on the Navajo Res specifically, the Navajo girls dominate. And it's not even close how much better they are every single year. Better in terms of the end of the year standings, and better in terms of end of the year rankings in the state and how they do in the state tournament. Every year in the state tournament, when it gets to the Final Four in the 3A is high as we go, like middle of the way. Like that's usually where the red schools are, 3A. And or Division 3, whatever your state is. It's basically the middle tier. You got about like 800 to 1,000 kids in the school. Whatever class that is for your school in your respective area, that's where it is. And the girls, they always dominate. Final Four every year. It always happens down in here in Phoenix. And 3 of the 4 teams, two, if not all 4 of the teams, are usually Navajo or Native. And it is just packs the gym that is hosting the state tournament. And it's like that every year. It's always Native girls just dominating. And they're just so much better because they do this same style. It's 7 seconds or less. Cutting, running, open, like passing the ball, finding the person cutting, getting an open layup, finding an easy shot, getting a floater up, or kicking it to the outside, having an open 3, and just continue to run. And it is a sight to behold. And the women, they just always kick ass. It's always the girls' team. And I'm just glad that they gave them their love to show them that reality. Because in this movie, you got the impression that the girls are better than the boys. And I don't know. It's debatable, depending on. I think realistically, if you played the two together, I don't know. I bet the boys would smoke them, but just because of size. But at that level in high school, it's about fundamentals. Who knows? It probably would happen. I bet you if you had a really proficient, like back-to-back state championship girls team, they'd probably mop the floor with any like Res boys team you put in front of them, just because they don't play that brand of basketball as well. Anyway, detracted a little bit from the point, but I thought it was beautiful that they showcased the reality of women dominance Rezball in at least in New Mexico, Arizona. The last piece about just memorable moments is the Scott Van Pelt segment on ESPN. That is why you leverage the hell out of LeBron James producing this film. And one of the little levers you pull is the relationship that he has with ESPN. So to have a SVP segment was badass. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing when I saw it on the rewatch. I'm just like, how did I don't know. Let's go ahead and play a little clip of that, just the audio.
Tonight's One Big Thing brings you the story about a team of Native American players in New Mexico who play a unique brand of up-tempo, pass-first basketball known as Rezball. Early favorites for the state title, they were struck by tragedy when their star player, Natani Jackson, took his own life. They've overcome this and have now won 14 in a row. But it's not just that they're winning, it's how they're winning. Do you know how to say baseline or screen in Navajo? These kids do, and they're winning because of it. For many Native Americans, basketball is a sole source of positivity in communities with some of the highest unemployment, alcoholism, and sadly, suicide in the country. This team, though, has found strength not from an outside source, but from their own rich culture. It has put rival teams on their heels. This team has incorporated their native language into the game by calling out plays, sets, jersey numbers in Navajo. Their postseason quest begins this week with the district championship, which has been renamed the Natani Jackson Memorial Game. This isn't just basketball, it's Rezball.
You guys did that.
This isn't just basketball, it's Rezball. Scott Van Pelt said that. if you watch ESPN, the fact that SVP had a segment was just like, are you freaking kidding me right now? Like, that was awesome. That was, I couldn't believe what I was seeing when I saw that. I could not believe it. So it's been a love fest. We're like 19 minutes in right now. Don't worry, negatives are coming, but we got a few more positives I want to hit. So the strong opening, the first 30 minutes of this film was phenomenal. When they set the stage for the potential for this team, showing the relationship between Jimmy and Natani, and showing Natani's unfortunate passing of his mom and sister, and then really showing the promise of the season, and then having an abrupt ending to that chapter with Natani's suicide. And even afterwards, how they portrayed his death and showing Navajo culture and keeping the fire alive for 4 nights. Like, that whole sequence was beautiful. And I was expecting that just tone and inertia and attention to detail and script writing to just continue. And it kind of fell flat after that. It went a little too corny for me. I called it like going off the Hallmark cliff. It got really predictable afterwards, and I wasn't a fan after that, like as much. But that first 30 minutes, my God, it was, even on the rewatch, even though I knew it was gonna like fall off a cliff for me afterwards, like that first 30 minutes, I'm just like, holy shit, they did it. This is beautiful. So that in itself was positive for me. Let's talk about the last thing. No, I went over all of it. So let's pivot now to the negatives. And there are a good number of them. As many positives as I went through, there are a number of negatives. So if you are here up to this point because you wanted to hear the positives about Rezball, I have chapters assigned to this on YouTube. You can skip right to the final thoughts and blow right past the negatives if that's what you want. If this movie is like Phantom Menace to you in the Star Wars saga, and you don't want to hear any negatives that Jar Jar Binks ruined the movie, you do not want to hear that it's the worst of all of the movies, then you should probably keep going. You should probably skip this part. And you know what? We had a good review, 22 minutes in. Just leave it all positive. I'll see you on the next one. If you're interested in hearing some negatives about Rezball, then why don't you stay right here? All right, let's jump into the negatives. Heavy themes. Heavy recurring themes. Why is this movie sad? Why make a sad movie? You have a chance to talk about Rezball, one of the most sacred things in our culture, one of the most sacred things in Native communities that people rally around, and you make it about suicide, alcoholism, you have teen pregnancy, you have, and it's just such a bummer. Like, I get it, write what you know. Sydney Freeland grew up on the res. This is what she knows. This Michael Powell, New York Times journalist, like this is that inspired this. This is what he documented. But it's like, Jesus, can you just be positive? I'm gonna play a clip that just sums up and it's at minute 31. And why I said the first 30 minutes were phenomenal, minute 31 is where Julia Jones comes in and just shits on the trajectory of this movie. Not her personally, but her character. Because this is where it just starts to fall off for me.
It's like a spirit finds us. That's the thing about natives. No matter how hard we try, we always find a way to lose.
Oh, God.
It's in our blood.
It's in our blood. I feel you right there. I feel you right there, man. That's exactly how I felt. So Johnny is outside. Jimmy is outside, and it's right after Natani's funeral. They just got done doing the fire, done putting his body in the ground, and Julia Jones just shows up, cracks a beer, sitting outside, and just is talking to him about how it's like, there's no point. there's just no point to all this. I mean, why even exist? What's the point of even living? Just a complete buzzkill. It's like you have an opportunity to talk about suicide in a positive way that's uplifting. Reservation Dogs did it the opposite. They world build this thing, and granted they had the opportunity to like have a series, so it was approached differently. But it ended on a resilient note. There is very little resilience in this. They showcase smidge, I don't know what you say, like tiny pieces of happiness, but overall it's pretty destitute. You don't get the impression that anybody in this show, or in this movie rather, outside of Jimmy is leaving the res. You don't get that impression at all. And why that's important, and I'm not saying leaving the res is the most important thing in this world. That is not what I'm saying in real life. In this reality that they are depicting, where you don't have any idea who Navajo people are. If this is the only thing that you see of Navajo people, you get the impression that staying on the res is destitute. And that's what I didn't like about it. And that's point number 1. So just Julia Jones, her character, just Debbie Downer vibes. Like the overemphasis on the basketball being the only outlet. I get it. Every lower socioeconomic status community is going to have a poor man's Hail Mary, whether it's education, whether it's music, whether it's athletics. But like the stereotype in poor communities is like your only way out is through like athletics or fame. Like that's the only way out. Other than that, you're stuck here with the rest of us. And I just couldn't stand every time there was an opportunity that Jimmy has when he's like, you know what? Things are starting to look up for me. Starting to learn my language, starting to reconnect with my culture. The team's starting to do better. I met this girl named Krista at Blake's. Shout out to Blake's, by the way. The fact that that's actually in this was great. But like the fact that I'm like meeting up with this girl at Blake's and she's teaching me my language, and then she just comes in and swoops in and just shits all over it.
I don't go to your games because I don't want to see you fail. Is that what you want to hear?
Do you get that I'm not you?
I'm telling you this from experience. Because the higher you go, the greater the fall.
The higher
The sooner
you
you
go,
realize that.
the greater the fall. Isn't that a great message to be sending out there? Just put it out there. I get it. It ends on a happy note. I get it. They end up winning the whole thing. They end up winning the state championship. Great. Yay for everybody. But that just, her character, it just was so frustrating to me. And I just hated that. And I rarely use the word hate, but truly, it just burned me on the inside of just like this kid, Jimmy, why do I keep calling him Johnny? Jimmy has all the chips stacked against him in this life. He has no father that we know of. His mother is not actively raising him at all. You get the impression he's raising himself because he has a job at Blake's to buy beer money for his mom. She does not drive, has multiple DUIs to her record, has no career prospects. She eventually finds a job, but it's certainly not a career by the time this thing is over. And he's eventually going to leave the res to go off and play college Division I ball somewhere, which is great. But with the situation that's at home, at some point she's going to blow it up again, and he's going to have to end up leaving his Division I basketball career and come back and look after her. Who knows what kind of trouble she's going to be in, because she's clearly not an adult and can't raise herself. And it just kills me to see that. So going back now, those are some heavy themes. I had issues with those. The next one is stereotypical portrayals. Alcoholic mother. Just boom, smacks you right in the face. Relies on her son to support her drinking habit. Like not even 15, 20 minutes into the movie, it's very clear that like that's the story. Boom. That is Jimmy's reality. The portrayal, let's talk about, that was a problem for me. So let's jump to native mascots. So this is one that we're going to be split on. I'm going to be very honest. Why a native mascot? You had an opportunity to tell a story about Native basketball. I get it. You want the Warriors, you want that imagery, you want that connotation when they're talking about the Chuska Warriors. But get away from Native imagery. I don't care if the Native community rallies around it and it's modeled, and you look at the Chuska Warrior logo and it looks like the Winter Rock Scouts in the sense that it actually looks like a Navajo may have drawn it. But I just didn't like it. And if you're looking on YouTube, then I'm going to share my screen and you'll see it. Show a picture of it. So the Chuska Warriors. It's got feathers around it on the outside. It's got a bow and arrow crisscrossing it. Chuska Warriors. Looks like a Navajo person. Has a headband-ish kind of thing on the top. Doesn't have a stereotypical features like you would normally see on a Native mascot. It's got a long hair, has a T-head, has his hair tied in the back. So at face value, looks like it was designed by a Native person. However, this is one of those things, and this is where it gets a little controversial. I'm from a community where we have a Native mascot, and it is a stereotypical, and if you followed the show for any point in time, you know it's Tuba City Warriors, stereotypical image. This giant pronated nose, this like huge pronated brow bone, and giant facial features to really, and has a mohawk with feather on the back. That's not representative of any Navajo anything. But what's important about that, and this is not just Navajo, is like that. There's a few other communities on the Navajo res specifically and across the reservations in the United States where they have given the opportunity for these Native communities, and they say, you know what? It's your community, your school. You draw yourself. So somebody, like nobody came and was like handing out Native mascot pictures. Somebody from Tuba City at some point was like, hey, draw yourself. Draw a picture that represents your community. And that's the picture we came up with. We drew that ourselves, and we weren't aware of what was informing our decision making when we drew that. So, but then you have like the Winter Rock Scouts, which is based on like actual Navajo imagery and representation, so it looks more authentic. But I will say it's a delicate thing to wield mascots in general, because to me it gives the permission to other people to utilize Native mascots. By us using it, it gives them permission to say, well, I can use it too. Look at them. Look at the movie Rezball. They had a Native mascot. So why can't I, in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, have a Native mascot, despite the fact that I have no Native people in my community, or very little Native people in my community, and it's just what we did. It's school tradition. That's what we gotta have. And across America, there are school board meetings happening all the time where changing the name gets put on the docket, and there's just contentious conversations and heated debates that happen. And now you have a movie, Rezball, that is showcasing a Native mascot, and now people can use this. And I'm not saying everybody will. I'm not saying recommending people do this, but you're putting it in non-Native people's heads that like, hey, that school has a Native mascot, so why can't we have one? If anybody should have an issue with having a Native mascot, it would be them. It goes back to the whole, well, the Redskins, the local tribe, is okay with us using the name, so why do we have to get rid of it? There's no reason. The same thing with the Chiefs. Well, I've never met a Native person that has an issue with the mascot, so therefore I gave myself my permission. That's my out. So now I'm good. So that's why the Chuska Warriors thing, I personally didn't like it. Personally, you can have a completely different take, and I respect it. But to me, I think it gives people the latitude to say that's why I can have a Native mascot, and they can force fit whatever argument they want. Have no Native people involved at all. I treat these like how radiation exposure is treated in nuclear power plants. Like, no dose is safe. There's no exposure level that's safe. There's no level of having a Native mascot that's safe. Even though you can say, I know how to use it, I know how to wield it to where it can be safe, I think we just get rid of it altogether. My opinion. Hot take. All right, let's talk about the next thing. The portrayal of non-Navajos speaking Navajo. This is a hill I'm going to die on. It's just something I am really passionate about. The analogy I always try to use is, Ian, would you hire Ian if I was a prominent Native actor? You know what? Let's use real actors. Let's don't use me. Brad Pitt. Let's say Brad Pitt. You want to go and play in the movie Shogun and speak as a Japanese person and learn Japanese? Don't worry. We're going to get you a language coach. Don't worry. We're going to get you a cultural consultant. And don't worry. We're going to make sure that you sound authentically Japanese. Don't worry. We're going to set you up for success. I don't care how much time Brad Pitt spends with that language consultant. I don't care how much time Brad Pitt spends with that cultural consultant. That 3 months, 6 months, however long it is, even if that person is standing on the other side of the camera and coaching them in between takes, a Japanese person's going to know, like, the hell was that? What the hell did you just try to say? And to some people that might seem extreme, especially those that may not necessarily have an understanding that there are the tribes, the native nations are completely unique. Yes, they might share a language commonality, a language group, but they're completely separate cultures, completely separate languages. So the fact that you're hiring native people does not mean everyone can speak Navajo. Even the Navajos might not be able to speak Navajo. A few of them did a great job. But that is just a hill I'm going to die on. And I get it. There's not availability of prominent native speakers of the native languages. But it's just, you have to I'm looking at it from the lens of a native person. And a part of why I'm being critical is because I'm Navajo. So I just want all of you that are listening and watching this podcast right now, this is coming from a Navajo person. I've watched poor Navajo being depicted in movies like Wind Talkers, where you're taking our most revered story outside of outside of Navajo land, which is the story of the Code Talkers, and you had non-Navajos speaking Navajo. You had Adam Beach. He's from Canada. He's not Navajo. And you just gave him you gave him voice lessons and language lessons, and he did a great job for what he is capable of doing, but it's not his culture, it's not his language. So of course it's going to sound funny. Of course there's a cap to how good he's going to sound, and that's what it was in this movie. So that's why for them to like force fit, and this goes to my next thing, is play calling in Navajo. What is the point of that? There is no point other than to pander and to like weave in code talking into this plot. There's just no point. There's no reason to do it. It's good because I played that Scott Van Pelt, the SVP segment. It's good for that. It's good television, but there's just no reason to have it. I'm going to play that scene where he breaks down where Johnny, I keep calling him Johnny, where Jimmy is breaking down like the plan to have plays in Navajo.
Switch it up a bit, and we're gonna call all the plays in Navajo.
You mean like the Code Talkers?
Exactly.
Except no Nicolas Cage, eh?
Stupid. How you gonna know what's going on? You don't speak Navajo. I said I wasn't fluent, but doesn't mean I don't understand.
A lot to do.
Hot hand.
Clear chanting.
Code for
So
bulldog.
that was good.
Disdin.
That was not good.
40.
Better ton yaje.
That was good.
Pistol.
This guy. Check him out.
I'm learning.
I want you to memorize every single one of them.
And is it fair of me to critique these people to this level? I don't know. I don't know if that's fair or not, but that's why I'm trying to be transparent, saying, like, I'm the Navajo person given this. There could be other Navajos that are like, hey, close enough, good enough, not a big deal, not a problem to me, whatever. And I'm not fluent, too, so it's like, where do I get off having this perspective? But I just don't. To me, I think there's just a gap there that needs to be filled when it comes to, if you're going to have the language in there, what is the purpose of having it in there if close enough is good enough for the filmmaker? That's my point. If you are making a choice to include Navajo language in this film and publishing it for the world, the globe to see. This is a LeBron James produced, Sterling Harjo co-wrote piece. Everyone's going to see this, especially if you're fans of LeBron James, if you're a fan of Rezball. You're going to see, Reservation Dogs, you're going to see this. So it was a choice to put Navajo language in this, and you had to shoehorn code talkers in here? Like, is that the whole purpose of that? That was my opinion. Might be harsh. And if it is, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. But I wrestled with that. This is part of the reason why I took this hiatus with this show, because it's like no one wants to hear that. When this show came out, everyone was hype about it. Everyone was all about this movie. Everyone couldn't stop talking about how awesome it was to see basketball represented on the screen. And here comes Ian with his, like, I don't like it when non-Navajos speak Navajo on screen take. And it's like, do people want to hear that? I don't know. But I got to a point where it's just like, you know what? Listen or don't listen to this podcast. This is my perspective. And that's where it is. The source material for this, and this is more of a comment on. Okay, let me finish this Navajo thing. The play calling in Navajo. Let's just talk about logistics. Is an overused word. If you I work in supply chain, so please be careful when you say logistics. The logistics of this whole thing, and I'm not using it there. That's normally when people would use it. The layout. So Chuska is supposed to be taking place, based on what I can tell, based on who they're playing, where they're located, it's supposed to be in Shiprock. I don't know why they didn't. This is a negative. Why didn't you just use Shiprock? Why did you make up Chuska? And I don't know enough about filmmaking, about screenwriting to know why that choice was made. But everywhere else is real. Gallup, Farmington, like Los Lunas, like Santa Fe, all these other places are real except for Chuska. It's this made-up town somewhere in the Four Corners area. But the Navajo piece didn't make sense to me. And so I'm going to give a really good reason as to why I feel like the Navajo piece doesn't make sense. You're playing all Navajos. Like, what advantage? And I get it, in the show, in the movie, they make it seem like they're playing non-natives, but if you watch the early games in the season, they're clearly playing Navajos. And in real life, IRL, Shiprock plays Gallup. They play Gallup in the movie. They play, in real life, Farmington, Bloomfield, Mayamura, Pedro Vista. They all have Navajos on the team. If Jimmy is running down the court and playing, and then playing point and shouting out, this Dean, somebody from the crowd or somebody from the other team's like, why is he yelling 40? And it's just, Lechon. What's he saying dog for? The game one. Like, that's going to be it. So at the very end, when there's this big reveal, when the villainous white guy runs by Jimmy, he's like, oh man, he knows Navajo. Or word's gotten around after game one, when they're yelling out plays in Navajo, that like, hey, everyone knows everyone knows the play. I don't know the advantage. The advantage didn't make sense to me. And this is why the Navajo bothered me. Because it's like, where is the advantage? The code talkers spoke in code, for one, but two, they were speaking in Navajo in a place where the Japanese were trying to intercept the language, intercept the code, and because it was in Navajo and in code, it couldn't be cracked. In this movie, they're like, oh, so we're doing it like the code talkers? Yes, we're doing it like the Code Talkers. So we're going to have our plays that we have in English and we're just going to call them in Navajo, and no one's going to know, despite the fact that we're on the Navajo reservation. Go figure that one out. And I just was like, Ian, it can't. You have to be the only one that is like focusing on it to this level. Once again, why I took my hiatus. Nobody brought this up in comment sections that I saw in Facebook, Instagram. I'm just like, you're playing Navajo people. You're playing Navajos on the other team. Disdeen. What's he saying 40 for if the players on the court aren't, the opposition are? Somebody in the stands is going to speak Navajo, and they're like, why is he saying 40? What is the purpose of that? An article about the Navajo Times is already being written. KTNN's already talking about it. Like, it doesn't even... That's why it bothered me in the Scott Van Pelt segment, where it's like, they're rallying around their language, calling all their plays in Navajo. Just like, yeah, where's the advantage? I don't know. Just, clearly, that was a sticking point to me. So if that wasn't for you, I apologize. But that was to me. Disdeen. Hey guys, they're running 40. Like, I don't understand it. They make it seem like there's just this like ancient language that nobody speaks, and this basketball team somehow just figured it out. They cracked the code. They did it again. They're gonna bring glory because of the language again. Ugh. Just like whatever. Let's get to the next one. So inconsistent, cold. I really think that the source material bothers me as well. It's not the fact that Sydney Freeland wrote this. It's not the fact that Sterling Harjo wrote this. Sydney Freeland grew up playing basketball. She did play basketball. She's from the res. That's not my issue. This is a Netflix problem. Why have this Navajo story and give credit to some white dude? Like this Michael Powell character. Yeah, he's probably a revered journalist, probably Hall of Fame career, lifetime achievement status. But just, if you're having this story about Native people, like, it just shows where representation is. They can't give the whole story to Sydney Freeland, to Sterling Harjo. So a lot of my criticism here isn't directed at those two primarily, because they're driving the bus, but they got the governor set by Netflix on the odometer. They got the governor set by LeBron James production company on the odometer. There's only so much they can do with this. Reservation Dogs, Sterling Harjo, Taika Waititi, they had full autonomy. This Rezball movie, it's very clear to me that there were confines placed on, you can express yourself about this far and about this far, and we're going to check you if it gets outside of those bounds. So they did the best. That's my opinion. Because if you end the movie and the first thing you do is a dedication to Michael Powell, which is the two things that this were based on, it's like, what the hell are we doing here? I don't need some non-native person to come in and tell a story about real life that we live already, that Sydney Freeland has lived already. She doesn't need that guy's stamp of approval to say, hey, this is a native story. This is what we're... But that, once again, that's a Netflix problem, and that bothered me. That was interesting. All right, the last thing is just Julia Jones' character. Like, why not show a redemption arc where the mother gets to see her son play? Instead, it's like, you just knew she was going to get, something was going to happen. She was going to get into a car accident. She was going to fall off the wagon. She was going to get arrested. Something was going to happen that was going to prevent her from seeing her son play. I just knew it. And sure enough, it went all at the very end, like Shooter and Hoosiers. Instead of listening on the radio in rehab, she was in the jail listening on the radio to the state championship game. And it's just like, I've seen this movie before. Why have I seen this movie before? Oh, because I've seen it before. And this is Hoosiers. And the tournament timeline. No respect to people who actually understand tournament timelines in state basketball. Normally it's 2 weeks. They compress the entire state tournament into 1 weekend, but that's cinema. You have to suspend disbelief. But if you follow any of that, they make it seem like, all right, Jimmy, we'll see you later. It's a Tuesday. It's a Wednesday. You're gonna play the whole thing this weekend. It's like you play the first 2 rounds one week, and then the next week you play the next 2 rounds. So he goes home before, like, at least once, at least twice before. I don't know. Whatever. That's getting in the weeds. That's caring too much about the details at the end. Let's move on. Let's talk about final thoughts. We're almost to the end. Last 10 minutes. So, rewatchability. This movie is better on the rewatch. If you have not seen this more than once, I recommend you go watch it again. I pointed out some problem areas, some sticking points, but overall, like, my major issue is why tell a sad story? And the Navajo piece, like, that's a very Navajo specific critique. So if you're not Navajo, that's probably a non-issue for you. I suggest you don't worry about it. But to me, the sad story part was a sticking point for me, along with the Navajo language, of course. But because that's a plot hole for me. It's more because it's a plot hole, not because it's there. It's just like, Disdain. Hey guys, they're running 40 again. And then I really think that Netflix has milked this enough, because Basketball or Nothing, the story docuseries about Chin Lee, that was because of his story, his book Canyon Dreams. And now you have Rezball. So I hope they milk this thing dry, and I hope the next time they talk about Rezball, they have a reservation basketball story, it's true to life, and it's from the lens of somebody that's not inspired by anything. It's just, hey, that's a great freaking perspective that we need to share. That's a story that needs to be told. Another thing is, I didn't like how the teen drinking was glorified. I get it. It's high school, and I get it. It's just, that's what kids do. That's what, especially on the res. But not everybody. Gen Z has, like, lower drinking rates than, like, anyone in history in terms of, like, youth participation in drinking. I think because they're drinking, or I think they're smoking weed primarily more and taking other substances. But, like, that's a piece that I feel like wasn't represented. But it's like, if you're going to show a plot in a film and a story where drinking and the reservation is like this cycle that's going to continue to perpetuate failure, then setting and glorifying teen drinking, it sets a dangerous narrative that these kids don't know any better and they're destined to fail. And you get that feeling. We have a teen dad in here, and he's out partying. The mom's out partying. Where's the kid? I don't know. You have Natani and Jimmy at the beginning of the movie, smoking weed, sitting on a corner, and, like, it's glorified. It's like, oh, look at this cool thing these kids are doing. After every big thing, then what are they doing? They're getting a keg. They're going up on the hill. And it's like, why? What's the point? I get it. Like, you want to showcase, like, real life, but you have a chance to tell a Navajo story about redemption, and, like, that's what you're doing. You paint this picture that it's destitute, that there's no way out, that if you stay on the res, it's a place you go to die, and then you glorify teen drinking. And to me, that tells the viewer that these kids don't even know the riptide that they're in. They don't even know the undercurrents that are at play. And that bothered me. Let's talk about real quick Navajo subtitles. While I appreciated it, it's a nice touch. It feels a little gimmicky. It feels like here is your Netflix saying, like, here's your piece you get. Because Navajo speakers, like, fluent Navajo speakers, I don't know very many who can actually read Navajo. So it's like, who is that for? Now, people who are learning Navajo, they'll read the Navajo, but they don't know how to pronounce it necessarily. So it's like, I would much have preferred to see this dubbed in Navajo. So that way you could couple the Navajo with the subtitles. And if your goal is to promote inclusion and then to promote the opportunity for people to use this as a teaching piece so they can learn Navajo, I think dubbing this in Navajo would have done much more for that instead of putting subtitles there. Because some of these words, they're, like, really difficult to pronounce. And if you've never heard them before, you don't know how to pronounce it. you might know how to read it, but it's like, I don't know what that is. So I really think that dubbing this in Navajo is like the next thing that should be done. I really think that overall, I give it like a 6 out of 10. I think overall it's a good movie. Despite my criticism, like this is an important point. Like it's a sports movie. It's not Crooked Arrows, which was awful. There's some bad sports movies out there with Native people in it. But this is good. I mean, it's a good starting point. I truly believe that this is a good place to start. Like I poo-pooed on it for a bit with the Navajo language piece and with the sad stories, and I mean that. That criticism is still valid, and I mean that. What I don't want to lose focus on is you told a reservation basketball story, and that has been long overdue. If you look at Smoke Signals, there's a beautiful piece in there where they talk about basketball, and you can see the reverence and importance for basketball. And that was like the only basketball that I could think of that was like depicted were like in Smoke Signals. And so you have a basketball movie just dedicated to basketball. There's a number of basketball documentaries showing the importance of basketball in Native communities, and there's a number of them, like Basketball or Nothing. Shoni Schimmel has a documentary. Chiefs is one of my favorite documentaries of all time, and the list goes on of just Native basketball stories. But that's documentary. It's never been done in like this. So for that alone, that's an achievement, and I take my hat off to Rezball for that. It's got to start somewhere. It's not going to be knocked out of the park from the jump. So I mean, Rezball does happen. I'm sorry, Reservation Dogs can happen, but this can happen too. It's rough. Like it is like Hallmark-ish. It was predictable. The plot was kind of boring. It was dry at times. The acting, it was very clear. These were first-time actors at times. But this is a movie that you can, as a Native person, watch and be like, hey, I'm represented on screen. I'm like, yeah, the story isn't the best that I would like to see. It's not the most uplifting, but it is a positive ending. So I will give it that. The ending is positive. It does end with us winning and Jimmy going off and potentially going and playing college ball. And that's cool. I like that. But overall, it's I don't know. I'm still wishy-washy, as you can tell about it. I really think a lot of that is just because I'm Navajo. And the Navajo language piece, that's a big plot hole for me. Disney. I'm such a douche. So, anyway, for those of you that love this film, it's okay to love this film. For those of you that don't like it, it's okay to don't like it. It's okay to don't like it. It's okay not to like it. I really just wanted to talk about this movie because it, one, is super visible and a lot of people talk about it. But I wanted to talk and highlight some of the things that I saw were positive and some of the things were negative, and then took some final thoughts. Hopefully it can help have a dialogue with some of y'all. So that's going to be it for me today. I want to make sure that you all follow me on socials, Native Film Talk, Instagram, Facebook. Give me a holler. Next thing I'm going to do probably is Killers of the Flower Moon. So stay tuned for that. Peace.